Shabbat Shalom, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another sermon here at Nazarene Way Church. If you're new here, then here's the deal. We are restoring the original movement that Jesus, aka his real name was Yeshua, and that's Aramaic, Yeshua, and Jesus the Nazarene. We are restoring his original movement, his original religion, and Nazarene Way Church does that. We are restoring the original Hebraic traditions, meaning none of the Roman pagan cult traditions, such as, Oyster, which is like, the pagan holiday, that they morphed into Easter and Christmas and all that stuff. It's really quite simple. For instance, for the holidays we celebrate, you just have to ask yourself, what holidays did Jesus celebrate? Here at Nazarene Way Church, we're not Christians. Christian is a term that was invented decades after the death of Jesus. The term is Christianos, which is a Greek term invented in Antioch. We are focused on Jesus the Nazarene, his practices, and his continuing legacy and dynasty, which continued on through his brother James the Just, and all of the Ebionim, which is Hebrew for the poor ones. And get ready, you're joining something special here at the ground floor of us restoring the movement of the Nazarenes. And you may have heard of the term, the Church of the Nazarene. That's actually has nothing to do with the original Nazarene sect, which the church, the Wesleyan Church, the Baptist Church, essentially had a branding and name change, and they called themselves the Church of the Nazarene. And so that has nothing to do with us, right? We are the actual original Nazarenes restoring the way. The Church of the Nazarenes are a Christian group, a Baptist Christian group that like to leverage and use the term the Church of the Nazarene, even though they have really nothing to do with the original Nazarene sect. They are essentially following Paulianity, which is what Christianity is, and it's the religion of Paul, since 13 out of the 27 books of the New Testament, of which Jesus never read, never followed, were written by Paul. And so it's funny, you turn to an everyday Christian today, and they're actually not following the religion of Jesus, they're following the religion of Paul. And we are here to peel that back, to fork back the branches that broke off from Jesus' original religion, which was the Nazarene Judean sect. And we're here to restore it. So, welcome. Now, for everyone else that is left, and for all of the Christians and Bible thumpers out there that's decrying heresy and all that stuff, hopefully you guys can exit the chat now, leave. And for everyone that's left, for all those who are open, curious, committed to learning, and committed to actually following the original path, the original way of Jesus, in that he followed, the Nazarenes and the Ebionites, who we know from the church fathers still followed and observed the Torah, and they followed and observed the Tanakh, which is the Hebrew Bible, otherwise called the Old Testament, which is actually made up of 3 books. The first book is the 5 books of Moses, which is called the Torah. Then there's the prophets, and then there's the writings like Proverbs, Psalms, stuff like that. And if you ask what, Bible we follow or text we follow, we follow the same text that Jesus followed, which was he followed the scriptures. He read these books, but he read it with a very critical and scrutinizing eye, because a lot of these books in here were written by what he called the lying hands of the scribes, right? The high priests and the doctrinaire, legalistic folks who essentially wrote in a lot of these man-made laws later on. And so that is what we're all about. We also, unfortunately, we know that the Nazarenes and the Ebionim, the poor ones, the original offshoots and descendants of Jesus's original followers, we know that they followed something called the Gospel of the Hebrews. The Gospel of the Hebrews, we know, is a version of the Gospel of Matthew, written in Hebrew, and it did not contain the first 2 chapters of Matthew, which were later prepended into the book of Matthew. So the texts that we follow are the Hebrew Bible, and we follow the Didache. We follow the Gospel of Thomas, which is a collection of Jesus's sayings. We follow the Clementine Literature, and we follow essentially, the book I have in my hand is the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew, and I took a razor to it and I cut out the first 2 chapters, right, which have the mythological account of Jesus's birth and Bethlehem and the virgin birth, which we know was prepended later on to meet and fulfill a prophecy, which was a misreading of Isaiah 7:14. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's jump into the sermon today. The sermon is called, and I'm looking out at my notes that I wrote down here, is called "Split a Piece of Wood, and There I Am." So the core verse of what we're going to focus on, and what I want you to meditate on and think about in this upcoming week, is something that Jesus said, and it's something that we have preserved in the Gospel of Thomas, which is a fascinating and beautiful gospel. A lot of the Catholics do something called Gnostic bucketing, where anything that isn't canon, they just call it Gnostic heresy. Oh, that's just a Gnostic mystical group. And so the Gospel of Thomas has a fascinating story. It was found amongst several texts, and the Catholics and people decried, oh, well, all these other texts, they have Gnostic sayings in them, and they're Gnostic, and thus we are going to discredit them. But if you read the Gospel of Thomas closely, it is not a Gnostic text. It is much closer to what scholars have theorized for many, many years, and that is that at the root of the gospel, the synoptical gospels, like the Gospel of Luke, the Gospel of Matthew, and the Gospel of Mark, they each perhaps used this underlying source called the Q source. Quell source is the German word quell, which means source. So this Q source document of all of Jesus' sayings. And what's interesting is you read the Gospel of Thomas, and one asks the question is perhaps this a late instantiation of all of the original sayings of Jesus? And so what we're going to focus on is saying number 77 found in the Gospel of Thomas, in which Jesus said this. Jesus said, "Split a piece of wood, I am there. Lift up the stone, and you will find me there." What does that actually mean? Split a piece of wood, and I am there. Lift up the stone, and you will find me there. So what Jesus is talking about here is the concept of, when he is saying, I am there, he's relating and talking about the concept of the power word that Aaron Abke, a friend of mine, and fellow Nazarene, and fellow individual that runs the Jesus Way podcast with James Benefico. One big thing that Aaron Abke talks about is the power of the word I am. Being one with something. And Jesus was not God. He was one with God. And we know from all of the texts that we have left over of the Nazarenes and the Ebionim that they did not believe Jesus was God. They believed he was the Son of Man. Ben Adam means Son of Man. Jesus never called himself the Son of God. That came later on from the Greeks and Romans and the pagans who essentially latched onto Paul's religion, the religion Paul invented, Christianity, and they, created this deity to worship, which they called the Son of God, and that became Jesus, right? Which is funny because one of the first commandments in the 10 Commandments is, "Thou shalt not take an idol," right? There is only one God. Jesus was not God. He was the Son of Man. But Jesus tapped into the power of the word I am, and relating that, I am one with God, right? And Jesus, I think, exemplified that in life better than almost anyone in history. If you look and ask yourself, who is the most popular and famous human being, Homo sapiens, to have ever lived? And guess what? That is Jesus, Jesus of the Nazarene. And so let's talk about this. Jesus said, "Split a piece of wood, I am there. Lift up the stone, and you will find me there." So what he's talking about here is something that I've kind of found interesting in my own life. I am not a handyman at all, okay? I can fix software, anything that's digital and virtual and not necessarily real. But when it comes to being a handyman, I am next to worthless. That's why I call my excellent handyman to fix a lot of stuff. However, I'm in the middle of a comeback that no one has ever asked for. And this comeback is my skateboarding comeback. I was a young kid, young teenager, and I skateboarded every single day of my life. Well, I've recently, and maybe largely prompted by the birth of my son Fitzy, I've taken up skateboarding again because I realized I'm like, wait, I don't have like all the time in the world to optimize and skateboard for the rest of my life. And so for the past 6 months, I've skateboarded for like 2 hours a day, almost every day. And one of the other things I've done is I've purchased a ton of skateboards, like 15 skateboards, and I built them all from scratch. I unscrew the hardware, I unscrew the bearings, I take them apart, I put them back together, I buy many different pieces, and like I have a massive toolkit now. So I've become a handyman. And what I found in doing this, in working out of like the back of my truck with all my different skateboards and putting stuff together and taking stuff apart, is I have found myself to be fully present in the moment, building something. Life is so simple when you're building something and you have your hands on something. And, you know, it's very interesting. This is what Jesus is talking about. Split a piece of wood. You know, we know that Jesus was a tekton, which is essentially a carpenter or someone that was like a day laborer. And, you know, what he's talking about here is Jesus is saying, split a piece of wood, work on something with your physical hands, and I am there. Lift up the stone, and you will find me there. When you get lost in time with something, working on something with your hands, Jesus is saying you are one with God through action, through being fully present, through building something. And what Jesus is saying here is how the ordinary is often so overlooked. Yet the ordinary, what we do in our everyday lives, if we are fully present, is where the divine is. It is where the divine is present. And that is the piece, and that is really what Jesus is talking about here with this teaching. You know, split a piece of wood. Split a piece of wood, I am there. Lift up the stone, and you will find me there with your physical hands. And again, this is not from the quote-unquote canon, which was decided by a bunch of Roman pagan cult members in the Council of Nicaea in the 4th century, right? This comes from the Gospel of Thomas, which preserves sayings from Jesus that echo deep, mystical, and Nazarene beliefs in the original followers of Jesus, the people that actually walked with him. And, you know, I want you to note something in this verse. Jesus does not say this. He does not say, you'll find me in the synagogue, or in the temple, or in Rome. No. Jesus says, split wood. Lift a stone, be present, work with your physical hands, do the present everyday things, and that's where you'll find me. That is where you'll find God. I am there. And so from a theological point of view, God really is in the ordinary, and that is what Jesus is saying. The Nazarene message wasn't just about a new religion or a new way. It was a return to seeing God clearly, to peeling away the added confusion and crazy stuff by the hands of the scribes and the high priests and the temple sacrificial cult and killing animals, which we know Jesus was a vegetarian. He was someone that did not kill animals. Thou shalt not kill doesn't just apply to human beings, it applies to animals. And hate to break it to you, ladies and gentlemen, just like every other animal, just like Pepper, this grunting dog behind the camera, just like Fitzy, my son, behind the camera, just like my beautiful wife, the earth angel, behind the camera. We are all living, breathing, conscious beings who want to survive and want to thrive. And the commandment, thou shalt not kill, Jesus recognized, doesn't just apply to the Homo sapiens species. It applies to all species, all conscious animals and species. And Jesus came to return us to seeing God clearly. You know, if you read the Hebrew Bible, which my sister is doing right now, like she'll ask me questions like, hey, why is God commanding you to, like, you know, murder and slit the throat of these animals to atone for a sin? Or, you know what, hey, if you really want to atone for a sin, go take your son up to a mountain and kill him, right? Oh, no, okay, well, you know, a lamb who's stuck and trying to survive and struggling, okay, that will suffice, and let's kill that instead, or a ram, right? No, that is not the message of God. If God was all powerful, omnipotent, and had all the 5 properties that we know God has, then God wouldn't just put human beings through this test. God would say, you know what? Hey, I forgive you. And you don't have to sacrifice and let the blood drip out of the throat of an animal to forgive. That is a human being idea. Jesus came to help us see God more clearly and throw that away, and he was killed for it. And in the Nazarene way, God isn't confined to buildings or rituals, but he is present in nature, in action, in simplicity. The Didache teaches simplicity. The Didache is something you should look up if you're not familiar with it already. It's spelled Didache. And this gives us another early glimpse into what Jesus' original followers ascribed to. And the Didache teaches simplicity, ethical action, and seeing God through deeds, not through hierarchy, not through some Roman pagan cultic Pauline idea that you need to believe in the blood sacrifice of Christ and you need to believe that he was, raised, right, from the dead, and faith matters over works. No, James the Just, James the brother of Jesus, and we find this in the book of James, which is hidden in the back of the New Testament, said the exact opposite. Jesus said the exact opposite. Works over faith. Works matter over faith, right? Actions, what you do, being present, building with your hands in the most mundane, ordinary, everyday things. If you are fully present, if you fully appreciate it, if you fully see the beauty in it, that is where you will find God. And that is what the Gospel of Thomas saying, number 77, is saying. Split a piece of wood, I am there. Lift up the stone, and you will find me there. So, where do you expect to find God, right? Well, if you ask the 1.2 billion plus Christians out there, and Catholics out there especially, they would answer the question, well, hey, I would expect to find God in the golden halls of the Vatican, right? But is that where you find God? No, Jesus says the exact opposite. Is God only found in the quote-unquote sacred things, like the sacred masses and the sacred, or in Bible study, or in the golden halls of the Vatican? No. Jesus is in the ordinary. He is in the everyday. He is in the kitchen sink. He is in the morning commute. He is in the cry of a baby. He is in the touch of your spouse. He is in the act of, like he says, chopping wood, like Rocky did. And I believe it was like Rocky, the movie, number 4. In lifting up a stone, in being present, in working on a skateboard, in being fully present, fully aware, and fully appreciative of God, and appreciative of how you are alive, and appreciative of the animals, appreciative of just even the most mundane things. Once you deprogram yourself from the flesh-eating, blood-lusting, wine-bellied culture with flesh rotting in the stomachs, which almost every Roman pagan cult member in our society does, eating flesh of a tortured animal that wanted to survive but got killed in a factory farm, washing it down with blood, the blood of your Savior, right? That is a cult. That is disgusting. And when you wake up from this disgusting dream that so many Christians find themselves wandering through, you will see the most ordinary things and see it in a new light. Right outside of our home, there's this spider, and it looks hideous. It looks ugly. The old me would have just, taken something, whacked down the spider, killed it, because I didn't want, my wife to walk into the spider web, or my son Fitzy. And of course, we're very cautious about that. We don't want that to happen. But instead of killing the spider, I've been walking down by this spider every day. My wife has. We look at it. She's scared as heck of spiders. But we see it in a new light because we are deprogrammed from the idea that we human beings have a right to kill anything. So we're looking at the spider every day and we're like appreciative of it, looking at it, looking how beautiful it is. And we see the world, that's a small example, through a completely new light. And I want to discuss something, the religion of the powerful versus the way of the Nazarenes, the way of Jesus's original religion. The religion of empire builds cathedrals and asks you to come to God. The Nazarene way reveals God is already here. He is in the most mundane things. God is not in the golden halls of the Vatican. Let me repeat that again because I want my wife to hear this. God is in the kitchen sink. He's in the morning commute. He's in the cry of the baby when we're busy and when we should pick him up and kiss him and not rush to deliver your sermon, right? That's where God is. And sometimes even I, Rabbi Scott, needs to be reminded of that. That is where God is. God is in the touch of your spouse. Or, like Jesus said, in the act of chopping wood. Jesus said, split a piece of wood and I am there. That is where you'll find God. Lift up the stone and I am there. That is where you'll find God. He is in the mundane. He is not in the Roman pagan cultish huge golden cathedrals or in Bible study. God is in the mundane things, in how you should think and appreciate every single little thing that you do. The Nazarene way reveals to us that God is already here. He is around us. The Gospel of the Hebrews teaches God is near the humble. He is near the meek. He is with the doers of the word. Next time you lift a stone, see God in the stone. Next time you split wood, listen. Listen to your heart. Listen to your soul. Be present. Appreciate it. God is not far. He is already present. The kingdom isn't coming over here or over there. As we know, Jesus said, God is within you and he is among you. He is within you and he is without you. Shabbat Shalom, and I'll see you next week. Peace.